Yes.
Now we come to a section dealing with this. All these ideas we've been talking about in the mind, can we classify them? Can we think about the way the mind acts? We saw that, the three operations of the intellect. But when we have the ideas in our minds, or the judgments, or the reasonings that we've always done, can we group them into how they are in the mind? So we come to the intellectual virtues. Now that word virtue, let's look at that for a second or two. It comes from the word vis in Latin, which means strength. Strength or power, if you like, in a way. We say he's got vim and vigour. Vim, there's the word in English. So vis went to vir. That's a derivative of it. That's the Latin word for man. But it means one who has strength, has power. Man is more powerful than, say, dogs, or physical power. A bear might be stronger. But man has intellectual powers, etc. That went to virtus in Latin, which means power in the abstract. And from that we get virtue, the word virtue. So these are in the intellect, these virtues. We call them habits. Now, habere in Latin means to have. What the intellect has. If you know Spanish, of course, you'll know that the B and the V are interchangeable in certain places. So it means to have. Habere means to have. And what the intellect has, what it possesses. They're qualities which perfect a power so that it acts well. It is the quality had by the power, which the power does have or have. Now what do they do? Why are they there? Well, we've got to retain what we've learned. We have not only sensitive memory, but we have intellective memory. The intellect has a power of memory, what all the other powers can do. Remember we said before, the intellect can do them in a higher way. But habits are to be found in the intellect and will. But what we're talking about here is the intellectual habits. They're added to our operative powers as accidents, like shape and colour in a ball or a brick or something, or even a tree. Well, the habits qualify the intellect, perfect the intellect. So remember, accidents are always what perfect something. Now, for instance, take this. Gold. Is gold valuable because it's gold or because of the beautiful colour and what you can do with it? All the accidents perfect it. Accidents perfect something. I remember a nun jumping and saying, that's ridiculous. What about sanctifying grace, sister? That's not our substance, that's an accident. It perfects us. So I beat her on her own turf. So there are two kinds. In the intellect, as it is speculative, knowing for the sake of knowing, or it's practical, knowing for the sake of doing. There are two kinds. And they gather all our knowledges together in 6 different species. So, first of all, in the speculative intellect, we have 3. Wisdom, science, and intelligence, which sometimes is translated as understanding. Now these are when the intellect is speculating or knowing for the sake of knowing. First of all, intelligence is the basic one. It's our knowledge of principles, speculative principles. For instance, the whole of something is greater than its part. Whatever undergoes movement is moved by another. Now these make up part of our common sense, our common knowledge. Remember, there are three elements to common sense. There's the, say, basic principles. Easy deductions from them. And some concrete judgments. I remember my little niece. She wasn't allowed to play with knives. Well, that's nothing special to her. I think all kids go through that. "Uncle, would you cut my apple for me?" she said. So I cut the apple in halves and I palmed one half and gave her the other half. "Where's my rest of my apple?" she said. And I said, "Half an apple's the same as a whole apple." She said, "Are you kidding?" She knew that the whole is greater than its part. She knew that. She was 3 years of age, by the way. She thought I was nuts to make a statement like that. I think she was right too. So they're the basic principles. And she made an easy deduction from them. Then there are concrete judgments. Like, for instance, all of those clouds, it's going to rain. Things like that. Simple. There's the basis of common sense. So that's what common sense really is. So intelligence, or understanding, is the habit of first speculative principles. And science is when we apply them. We use them to draw conclusions. So we define science as certain knowledge through causes. This is the term or effect of demonstration, when we're demonstrating something. It shows us not merely that something is so, but why it must be so. So we assent to a truth and contemplate it as we arrive at truth by reasoning from premises to a conclusion. For instance, every man is mortal. Or no, look this one. Whatever undergoes movement is moved by another. But things do move, therefore they're moved by another. But so you go on and you end up saying that there's a first cause of all movement. You remember? Oh, well, no, we'll be doing that later, won't we? Yes. So science is drawing conclusions from these intelligence, or the habit of first speculative principles. Now, lots of people think they're doing science. I love asking students, what is science? You can never get a real answer. Oh, it's using test tubes and things in a laboratory to look at nature, something like that. Well, does mathematics do that? Well, that's different. Yeah, how's it different? They're not sure. But we must, unless you're drawing conclusions, you're not doing science. You could work in a science laboratory observing movements of things, colour changes, and all sorts of things for years and not do one scientific act. But I see the look on students' faces when you tell them this. Not till you've drawn a cause, you've found a cause of something, are you doing a scientific act. Now, but some topics, some studies, we look for supreme causes, the ultimate cause. That's wisdom. And there are two wisdoms, two sciences of wisdom, metaphysics and sacred theology. Certain knowledge through supreme causes. Wisdom is a science, but it's more than a science. Metaphysics is a science, but it's more than a science. The Secretary of the Catholic Academy of Sciences, when I presented a paper on the distinction and method of the sciences, well, some people wouldn't call them sciences. Wisdom, well, metaphysics, for instance, it's a science, but it's more than a science. So they're the three speculative virtues. Now, just as, well, I'll put the other three on the board. I think we should put them down now. The practical sciences. There's synderesis. You better answer that. It might be the telephone. Sorry about that.
No, you're not.
Down at Lewisham at St. Peter's Church one day, somebody's phone went off and he says, "You better answer that." He said, "Father so-and-so," and it diffused the whole thing. But Anyway, synderesis. Now that's the habit of first practical principles, which we study in ethics. There can be no coordination without subordination, for instance, and that sort of thing. Or a common effect requires a common cause or something, in social matters the same as elsewhere. So first we have synderesis, and that's the basis. Just as this is the basis of the practical, the speculative ones, is the basis of the practical ones. Then we've got prudence. Then we've got art. Now note, synderesis, we've got first practical principles, but that's all very well. There can be no coordination without subordination. Or if you want, everything operates for the sake of an end. Society, in any social group, it's a common good, the end. Always is a common good. That's what you're seeking. And of course, common good is misunderstood dramatically, as you could see in the recent elections. People often use the term common good, and you say, what the hell are they talking about? They talk about the public good, not the common good. We distinguish them, you remember. Now, prudence applies those principles here and now. It's the virtue of here and now. Now, these are practical. Remember these practical habits. Excuse me. Excuse me. But we don't operate. I had a friend, he died some years ago. He never knew what prudence was. When he was a student, he'd say, what is prudence? And as Dr. So-and-so said on one occasion, he doesn't know what prudence is because he hasn't got any. I've seen him standing on a street corner trying to think, what will I do next? Will I have some supper? Will I go and see a movie? Couldn't make up his mind. Long time to make up his mind. And he had to turn to me and say, what should I do? He couldn't, he could synderesis, he'd run rings around us all. He'd get out to the principles and tell you all how they should apply, etc. But when it comes to practical applying, prudence is that judgment. You can find prudence, people who have no synderesis, they don't know anything about philosophy, but they got marvelous prudence. There was one very famous person. Who was he?
Einstein?
No. Famous for his prudence. Now you may remain seated.
Franklin.
No.
What are we looking for?
We're looking for somebody who had a tremendous renown for his prudence.
Lincoln.
No.
Adams.
You,
No.
St. John
you
Vianney.
dare? St. John Vianney. You Yanks, all you can think of is an American all the time. That, no, and there are different prudences. There are the individual prudence, the prudence of family, say parents, the prudence in society, political prudence, military prudence. Some men are marvelous at this in military prudence, for instance, great judgment. But the famous St. John Vianney was dumb with regard to his studies, almost. They had to push him through. But he was the one that talked to the animals, wasn't he?
No.
Wasn't he?
No, that's
St. Joseph Cappuccino.
Who was that one again?
St. Joseph Cappuccino
Oh, yes.
was close with animals.
Yeah, close with animals, that's right. And he was another one, wasn't he? Pretty, had to push through his studies or something? Yes. And, but he had great prudence, great prudential judgment, the practical order. Those people, so you don't have to be brilliant to be prudent, to make it. The mother of a family has a special prudence. The father of a family has a special prudence. There are special prudences. For instance, when I put up pictures in my home, when I moved into it, I always went to a woman and asked some woman what did they think about this, rather than me do it.
that was pretty.
Yes. Now, where was we? Yes. Prudence is right reason about things to be done. The Latin is quite interesting. Factibilium, factibles, things to be done. That's the factibilium, yeah, things to be done. And ratio recta factibilium, right reason concern factables, if you like. Now, art is right reason about things to be made, not to be done, but to be made. And art is in the intellect. So a great pianist, a great violinist, etc., etc., it's all in the intellect, not in the hands. I think about every year, Christmas time, I get foot and mouth artists, I think they send me their cards, and I can't send cards out. I just absolutely am overwhelmed. I try to send cards out, Christmas cards. I send one to my brother and one to my sister. But anyway, the thing is, when I see what these men have done, and the card and the calendar that comes with it is all made by some man with a paintbrush between his toes. No hands. That sort of thing. So where is art? In the intellect, not in the feet. That's where it is. In all the art of assembling things. You might say, look at the way this is set up. You might think it's artistically set up. Of course, it's pretty standard stuff. But it's not in the hands, it's in the intellect.
But if it's in the intellect, why isn't everybody an artist?
Well, they don't have the virtue of art. They don't have the proper disposition of like in their nature, of the internal senses. You see, they don't have the proper disposition of that. One man is inclined towards composing music, another man's inclined towards, say, painting, another man's inclined towards building, etc.
But the inclination reaches out to the hands?
Oh yes, yeah. That's the supreme instrument, as the philosophers always called it. That's the ultimate instrument. But what is an instrument? Instruo in Latin, you'll remember, means I built. Instruo. Plus mentum. Mentum means that whereby. So an instrument is that whereby you build. The means. That is sort of, in a way, so instrumentum means something whereby you build. You see, so the hand is the instrument. That is what's so magnificent. What is rational flows right through our body into our hands. But it's primarily in the intellect. I can't say, if a police officer stopped me, that I was speeding. Well, it wasn't me, officer, it was my feet and my hands that did it. You know how far
My professor said so.
So, you know, when you're training students, you not only are teaching them, but you're also training them with, the piano, the building up what we call accustomizations. We may say something about that later. Accustomizations, that's in the neural endings, in the synapses of the nerve, where it depends upon little cells crossing that gap, the internuncial space. A friend of mine discovered that, Dr. Victor Kinsella, and somebody else in Australia, Sir John Eccles, took his stuff and developed just a little bit, just put it together in an article and got a Nobel Prize for it. But Victor Kinsella was somewhat hated in Australia because he published a booklet, exposing what was going on in the universities, what the positivists, the logical positivists, what the empiricists were doing in the classroom in the universities, teaching false philosophy. And he exposed them. That was when I was in Montreal in 1960. And they were thinking of suing him and all sorts of things. But he exposed them and they couldn't take it. He discovered how this international space, as it's called, the nerve, the big problem was, I know when we're studying empirical psychology, for instance, how do messages travel through the nerves? How do they travel from the brain out to the feet, etc.? They build little basket cells in here, and chemical substances are deposited in them. And that's what this person's doing when they're practicing the piano, etc. And they deposit substances like acetylcholine in the basket cells, as they call them. And Victor Kinsella took that from Aristotle. It's amazing what's in some of the ancient philosophers. One of the most amazing ones is what's in St. Augustine. One of the professors at the Aquinas Academy in Australia was telling us about what St. Augustine taught. And I saw it in St. Augustine's writings. I've forgotten which one it is now. Got a note somewhere. But about when the First World War was on, there's a false passage forms in the rectum of a human person. Say, it'll be a false rectum, as it were, forms in a ear. And it becomes very infected and very painful. And they used to try another thing that was discovered during the First World War was the EUSOL, E-U-S-O-L, Edinburgh University solution. It's a chlorine solution. And they packed it with chlorine solution. They did all sorts of things. They clean it out and try and pack it, and it was painful for the person, extremely painful. Now, somebody got an idea. Clean it up, sterilize it, then slice it. Slice through it, and it healed up just like that. Then they found in St. Augustine, and these are St. Augustine's words, about we had to send brother so-and-so down to Alexandria for the surgeon to use the knife. That was in the 4th century. And we rediscovered it in the First World War. It's amazing what is hidden very often, the judgments in some of the ancient writings. We haven't yet discovered how they perfected the great colours in the cathedral, in the glass. We haven't yet discovered that, apparently. So there's where art is, my friends, pardon me. The beautiful stuff, there are 2 lovely works written on this. Intuition in Art and Poetry by Maritain. Intuition in Art and Poetry. There's another one he wrote, and I haven't, I can't think of the name of it. The other one is also on art. They're hidden in my 7,000 books somewhere. I don't know where. I'm not even sure where they'd be now. So in science, then, there are 8 scientific areas. There are 9, but the 9th we know nothing about. Come to that in a minute. The first, there are philosophical sciences: logic, philosophy of nature, metaphysics, ethics, and poetics. Poetics is the science of art, philosophy of art. In other words, aesthetics, engineering, and all that sort of thing, the practical making. Then there's mathematics, sciences of nature, and sacred theology. And sciences of nature obviously depends whether you're studying rocks or plants or man or brute animals, etc. So that's a generic name. Now the 9th one, there's a supreme science that's beyond us. It's the science of God as God. It's the knowledge of God as he would have it. The science, he knows himself. So we don't have that science. So there are the scientific areas. Just as we have to have intelligence, the habit of first speculative principles, these are the first practical principles, the habit of first practical principles. So in each case, you've got a basic knowledge. And we're studying that, of course, as we're studying philosophy. We're studying some of those. The first practical principles is directive of willings and doings. That's not a very good division there, because the doings come from willings too. Any questions on any of that at all? So these are the qualities in the intellect. The speculative qualities and the practical qualities. So that's classifying the knowledges we have, the different knowledges. Of course, science is a variable one. I mean, well, not a variable one, a varied one, I should say. It includes a lot of subjects, a lot of different sciences. But the important thing is to understand its nature, that it means it is a subject whereby we draw conclusions about causes. And often when you're studying something, you're studying preparatory stuff, which leads into the science, but you don't do the science till you start to draw conclusions. Now we ask a question. We come to on page 61. We ask ourselves a question. Lack of intellective life in plants and brutes. A girl bailed me up at the Boulevard Mall one evening. I was showing a Canadian friend around the mall there. It was a bank manager, a friend who never had come over this side of the border much. Didn't have occasion to. And a girl came up to me and said, "Would you sign this petition for animal rights?" And I said, "By the way, it's nearly always girls I find with animal rights. That's my experience." I don't know, one girl said, "Well, men are animals, aren't they?" So I said, "Well, what is an animal right?" She looked at me, stunned. Nobody had asked her that, apparently. I said, "Well, what is a right? Tell me what a right is. I can't sign something if I don't know what it is, and you're going to tell me, you're the authority." And of course, the poor girl was flustered. "Ask him. He knows. I'm sure he knows. This is the fellow who was in charge or something." We didn't waste our time. Of course, we didn't sign it. And the same in Australia. My sister and I were going to a mall one day, and another girl bailed us up and says, "Would you sign for animal rights, please?" And my sister came straight in on and said, "Yeah, the kind of animals that's in a woman's womb, is it for that too? They got rights?" She played them back at their own game beautifully. And so, as you remember, we studied in ethics, rights are a consequence of an obligation. We have an obligation that imposes a right, and a right is a moral power over others, remember. If I'm the father of 10 children, right, I've got obligations to those 10 children. That means, with respect to you, you've got to keep your cotton-picking hands off my 10 kids and allow me to educate them. A right is founded in obligation. It's prior to... People say, "Oh, don't forget with rights you've also got obligations." No, it's not an also. It's the other way around, as a matter of fact. You've got to have obligations in order to have rights. If there's no obligations, there's no right. So the first thing we ask is, do plants have knowledge? Or I didn't give the heading. The lack of intellective life in plants and brutes, page 61. So do plants have knowledge? By sense or intellect, because there are only the two kinds of powers to know knowledge there. So remember, the form, it directs the production of the suitable matter in a child. And in an embryonic tree or an embryonic animal of any kind, that the form is the inside fixer of a thing that fixes it to be what it is. And the development of the matter with a tree is according to the form it has. The development in the matter of a monkey depends upon the kind of form it has. Its form, the form of a monkey. So, the organs of such powers, although plants have been studied absolutely thoroughly, we did the biggest first-year course in botany in the University of Sydney when I was in pharmacy. We had to do the biggest course, and it was a tremendous amount of stuff. One of the most interesting courses I think I ever studied in my life. But there are no organs. You don't find organs in any of the plants. And if they did have knowledge, they'd need organs of some kind. Or, if they didn't have that, they'd need intellect. Well, the intellect would presuppose some organs in a senses that fed the intellect. Or, if you like, is it an angelic being above all matter? Hardly. A purely intuitive intellect would not be present in the body. If it was in a body, it could not then be intuitive, nor could such an intellect inform a body. Nor would there be need of a body for such an intellect. An intuitive intellect knows immediately. It doesn't have to reason out. It knows, it comes to its conclusions immediately. Angelic intellects are all intuitive. We say when we're studying ethics, for instance, that women generally tend to have more of an intuitive intellect. Men tend to have more a rational intellect. Men have to reason things out very often, or have them spelled out for them. But a woman will often see immediately. I think I've used this example before. Did you see so-and-so at that wedding? I think there's something going on between those two. Did you notice how he was paying attention to her? No, I didn't. I didn't notice that. Didn't you see he did this? Yeah, I did. I said, yeah, well, there it is. And she saw more in it, and the look of the woman's face, etc. That's the intuitive intellect. Women tend to see the details. Men tend to see the overall. Did you have a question?
Well, it was another
Oh.
topic, so I wanted to let you
Okay.
finish.
So, people have argued, but they could be sitting there thinking. Now, if they're sitting there thinking, and we'll see this applies to animals too, you can't have a form without the formal effect. If it's sitting there thinking, then it would develop the necessary organic structure, and it would operate in a certain way. Well, I've never seen any plants going to school. I've never seen any plants having games. It's just absurd to suppose that there's knowledge in plants. And then, if we come to brutes, do they have intellective powers? What about monkeys? They can be sitting there thinking and not bothering to tell us about what they're doing. Well, look at it this way. If dogs could think, could reason, there may a time that they would have a great advantage if they had reasoning, a tremendous advantage. They'd develop a language to convey to each other and to develop to the master, convey something to the master, and would say, don't put me in the cage, or don't do this, or don't do that. I want this, or I don't want that. Or I'll work better for you if you give me this, or don't do that. But if you could see people in, say, animals in their native state, Woodbury used to say that the people who talk about animals very often in universities have never lived amongst animals, or never been amongst animals. Of course, he was very famous as a director of cattle breeding too, Father Woodbury. And the biggest agricultural society in the world, they say, was the Sydney Easter Show. It's extraordinarily big. And he was instructing men to be judges for the cattle. So, but cows, I remember him walking, we used to go to an orphanage, and he was directing the breeding of cows in this orphanage. They had record butterfat production, and 1,000-pounder cattle, and he produced 1,000 pounds of butterfat in a year. And I remember him talking to the animals. And he said, you must talk when you're amongst animals, so they'll know you're not a tree, or something like that. One day a bull got really mad at him. I was scared to hell, to be honest with you. And I called out to my wife to go and quick and get Joe, bring a whip or something. And but Woodbury just kept his eyes fixed on the bull. That's enough of that now. Forgotten the bull's name now. And he kept his eye on it. He leaned down and just picked up a block of wood. And just, enough of that. You behave yourself there. And the bull backed off. Its eyes were getting red. And but he was master, and the bull knew it. And the bull couldn't have done a thing, of course, if the bull charged. He had that block of wood in his hand. The bull saw that. So animals, if they had sense, at least intellect, if they had knowledge, in the intellectual knowledge, they would use it. They'd need to use it. You know, it's time for food or something else. Animals act instinctively, of course. They'll come and get food. They'll know when their bellies are empty and the cows are sort of knowing, getting ready and maybe heading towards the cow bales or something. They'll often see, they know they've got to be milked and that. But intellect, remember, intellect has all these properties. And if the animal has intellect, it manifests these properties. They're talking beings. They're laughing beings. They're social beings. They're political beings. And all of these are consequences of intellect. They're artistic beings. They're economic beings. They're, oh goodness, about 10 or 12 of them. Pardon?
Jumping beans.
Joe, that's too much. And so on. Anyway, so all of those, they've manifested. They've developed the organs of speech. Because the form would give them that, would cause that to develop in the matter, the organs, so that it expresses, it would express the rationality of the thing. But to live amongst animals, they're chickens, and I'd say kangaroos, they're dumb. They're dumb. Animals are just plain dumb. Some have greater, we use the word sagacity, which almost means wisdom, a sort of a natural wisdom. But they don't acquire it. It's natural to them and fixed in some direction. So let's look at some of these. Many, such as the higher vertebrates, this is on page number 2b in the brutes, have the organic structure enabling them to express by speech, by art or hands, etc., what they understand. Monkeys have hands, but they neither speak nor are they artistic. Some can be trained by hard work and a lot of patience on the part of the trainer to utter voice sounds, for example, parrots and certain others. The Australian lyrebird can imitate with extraordinary accuracy the sounds of machines, other birds, etc., but never speaks. I remember dealing with a class of women nurses. Funny, it was only, there was one fellow, all the others were women, 125. His name was Billy, and I was using Billy and Betty in those days a lot to illustrate, lots of examples. And I said to him one day, I can't remember your name. What he said? Billy. This was a roar of laughter amongst the women. But I remember people saying, but I've heard even dogs made to speak. Yes, they got the vocal cords, but they don't speak. They're trained. And they can only say one or two things. Like a parrot will say, Polly, want a cracker? Polly, want a cracker? If the house is on fire, they don't say, go and get the fire brigade quick. They say, Polly, want a cracker? that's how they do it. So, I said that there's one in Australia, the lyrebird and the parrots. The parrots can be often trained. People will say, Polly, want a cracker? And then they'll produce a cracker for the parrot. And they'll induce them to speak by training. Remember, you train the animal for our sake. You educate a child for its sake. So, with the, I said there's one in Australia, I've heard it speak 10 languages. I've heard it speak Greek, I've heard it speak Latin, I've heard it speak French, Italian, German. It's called a tape recorder. So that's all that parrots are. They're little better than tape recorders. So it might be argued on 2C there, right in the center of the page, it might be argued that they are of superior intellect and do not want to speak, either to each other or perhaps to us. This is against the whole idea of speech. Good is diffusive of itself. There's the principle which comes from the Neoplatonic philosophers, the 3rd to the 5th century. Good is diffusive of itself, and whoever has an idea to be communicated will communicate it. Furthermore, brutes suffer greatly from the want of speech, and yet do not employ it. For example, within their own so-called social life, they would benefit from the use of speech. For example, food gathering, approach of enemies, subservience to man, education, establishment of leadership, not mere domination, economic activities, etc. What is said about speech also applies to the other properties of intellect, such as political and economic activities. Risibility, in other words, laughing power. Sociality, not mere gregariousness. Grex in Latin means a flock. They just don't merely flock together. Remember the saying, birds of a feather flock together. Well, birds and all animals will live together in their own species. Or if their species dictates that they're loners, they'll all live as loners. They still come together for reproduction. So the something I was going to say there. It might be argued that intellect could be present and that the brute is merely contemplating reality, as even some humans do sometimes, without manifesting its understanding. Thus they would contemplate more than eaties and sexies. And that's what all the animal sounds are about. All the sounds are passion sounds, and they're about two things, eaties and sexies. Surely they would demonstrate at least the curiosity of a child. But you can see an animal will play something, then just toss it aside. Curler's famous arguments about the monkeys getting sticks, putting them together and knocking down bananas. What people don't quote is the fact that the monkeys played with the sticks and they got jammed together after hours of playing. Then they grabbed a stick and jumped up and tried to, on a box to try to knock the bananas down. Then later jumped on a sheet of paper to try and knock the bananas down. The monkey had no idea of an instrument as it is an instrument. So since we've come to the end, I want to tell you a little story about the two monkeys that broke into a library in New York City. One grabbed a copy of the Bible, and the other grabbed a copy of Charles Darwin's The Descent of Man. And the one with the Bible says, you know what it says here? I'm my brother's keeper. And you know what the other one said? He said, I'm my keeper's brother. Did you have a question? I'm sorry.
When, for example, animals use certain instruments, is that a kind of almost luck, or is it a unreflective notion of what is instrumentally
like
valuable?
The apes putting a stick down a hole
To get
ants.
or
Yeah.
something like that?
Well, it's based on, say, association of images. They've probably stumbled on something and that's developed. But usually, whatever the animal does, that's all it does. It doesn't progress beyond that. That's a puzzling one, and the same as the ones that use a leaf to drink. Who knows? It's within the range of their instinctive activity usually, and directed by association of images. But we could say that it's something that sort of was learned by somebody observing a human or observing some monkey doing something. It's hard to say. But that's all they do. That's the difficulty. That's where it explains it more. But I'm going to give you some examples over the page here, which we'll do with the next class, because we're over time now. But in many of the things that insects and animals do, they're marvellous. Like the horse opening the gate with his muzzle. But he probably did it for days. He knows that's something, association of going out, because when his master opens the gate and goes out, well, he doesn't know how to do it, but he accidentally finds out how to do it and learns a little bit from that. And that's apparently not uncommon for a horse to do that. It's hard to explain some of them at times.
But then they
One
respond
example-
because of the satisfaction they receive?
Yes, yeah. Oh, yes, exactly. This happened to me. Mrs. Could you just hang on for a sec? This happened. I was in the Burragorang Valley, three of us. Cedric told us nobody had ever been up in these mountains on horseback, and three of us went up there. And the other two, I was behind the other two. They're walking ahead. And they came to the creek, little creek there, and I said, oh, look at the fox, a golden fox over there. Beautiful. And he seemed to realise we had no rifles with us, and I'd even left my camera behind. So I'm looking at that, and my horse came to the creek and didn't wade through. With all fours, it leapt over the creek. When I picked myself up out of the creek, you saw Blazing Saddles, did you? You saw the movie? Remember they punched the horse and knocked it out? They got that from me. Thank you very much. We've had a good night.